Well, I would like to make it a bit more interactive and ask everyone who had any kind of problem with banking or payment through your lifetime, as a person, as a business, any funds get stuck somewhere, you try to make an international transfer and you had some issues with payments and banking. I mean, I think yes, right? So we are not the lucky ones here to avoid that. So that's the problem. I had a client a couple of years ago who was a really successful business person in France, and that was the time when Dubai was booming and all the companies came here. And he came here and he started to do the business and invoice the whole world and make a substantial amount of money. And he decided that, all right, I'm missing France. I want to retire, buy a French chateau, and cash out. But there was a problem that he couldn't move the money from Dubai back to France because there was no French bank which accepted the money which was coming from Dubai. Why? Because Dubai, unfortunately, back at the time and even today, is operating on a different kind of regulatory framework than the European banks, right? So if you think that, okay, it's just easy, I'm just going to Dubai, move the whole family, get the school for the kids, and settle down, buy a nice villa, and life is good, I'm paying less taxes. Well, not that fast, because chances are that if you make money in Dubai, that stays in Dubai. And Dubai knows that. And that's why you have to buy the apartment here. You have to spend the money here. Why? Because it's not that easy to move the money back to US or to Europe or to the UK. So this is what I will talk about today. All of those setups and mainly the real banking costs and the risks. And a couple of words about myself. I started as a tax consultant, tax accountant back in Cyprus when Cyprus was joining the EU. So a lot of companies, international companies, went to Cyprus and started an international company and take advantage of the taxation, right? It was a long time ago, 20 years ago. But when compliance became more and more of a hurdle and a problem, who do you ask? Your accountant. So a lot of clients came to me and they said that, okay, Victoria, I understand that if we do some magic and the tax is optimized and everything is legal, it's fine. But how am I going to find a bank or a payment provider who is willing to work with me? And mine, back in the day, Cyprus was a hub for all of those brokerages, investment companies. Later on, 2016, 17, I'm talking about crypto came, ICOs. So there was one thing that you set up a company, then you optimize your taxes, and there was a whole different story of how to find a payment or a banking provider to do that. And that's when I realized that no one has a clue. Your CFO or your accountant or even your lawyer is not trained on what is a SEPA, what is SWIFT, what is open banking, what is mobile payment, what are the transaction fees, what is data security, how to analyze all of those payment data. No one has a clue about payments and banking, and everybody's problem is the blocked funds or opening an account. And they're all going to accountants and lawyers who are just not trained on anything. So I actually wrote a book about that, Moving Money, How Banks Think, which is explaining how banks think and how money moves internationally, which was supposed to come today. Unfortunately, it didn't arrive. Otherwise, I would have given all of you a book. But please find me tomorrow. Hopefully this afternoon is going to arrive. But worst comes to worst, tomorrow it should be here, where I'm explaining how banks think and how money moves internationally. So let's start to explain how banks work. But to understand how banks work, we need to know how banks think. So first of all, what is a bank? Well, a bank is something which is giving me a mortgage and I'm putting the money in and they just use the money and they deal with money. Yes, that's one thing. But more importantly, banks are appointed to maintain a healthy society. Banks are the policemen of the economy. They are the ones who are printing money. They are the ones who are enforcing the monetary and fiscal politics. And they are the ones who are maintaining the trust in the financial system. I give you money and you accept it. Why? Because you trust that if you give that money forward, someone is going to accept it and they will use it again as a money. So this trust has to be maintained. And banks are appointed to monitor and maintain this financial economical system worldwide. They are semi-governmental because they are exercising all of those policies that the government is making a decision of, interest rates and print money, don't print money and whatnot. So they are basically the backbone of the economy, working together with the government to maintain a healthy economy and a healthy financial system. So they have to be sure to enforce all of those responsibilities that makes the economy alive. They have to be sure that no one is committing crime, no one is cheating their taxes, and make sure that they follow the funds, and their responsibility is to report back to the tax office. And that's why the government trusts them that they are doing a good job, and that's how they are having a financial license. So as a rule of thumb, every single time that if you're holding funds or if you're transferring money, then you have to report it back to the tax office. That's why you have to be licensed. And if you're not doing a good job, you're losing your banking license, you're losing your financial license. And if you think that, I've got an offshore account and my tax office is not going to know about it, you're wrong. Because the whole idea is all the banks need to make sure that you're not committing any kind of crime and you're declaring your taxes accordingly. Now, knowing this, now we know that a bank is losing their license, or they can have a massive penalty for non-compliance. You're not doing something that you're supposed to do. Or when you're doing lakhs of checks, right? Okay, it's not that much of a money, it's fine. If they are not doing what they are supposed to do, they can have a penalty or losing their license. If they are assisting in any kind of money laundering or even tax avoidance. And we have seen so many banks going down when they were not really checking what's happening. I'm just looking at you, Malta, when there was a Iranian massive money laundering scandal, which put the whole country on the gray list. So, but we need to understand that banks are also private institutions. They have shareholders, so they still need to generate some profit. At one hand, your hands are tied because you've got a license, you need to report it back to the tax office. If you're not doing it right, you're going to lose your license. But you have a shareholder board, which you need to make happy, right? You need to generate some profit. So what they do, they are chasing the perfect client. Who is the perfect client? There is no opportunity for tax avoidance or money laundering, but they are having a good volume, right? So they are still, generating some profit for me as a bank. So what's the problem, right? Well, the problem is that every country has different rules and regulations. So if I'm a bank and I'm appointed to make sure that police the economy, make sure that no one is committing tax crime and no one is cheating anything, and I'm losing my license if I do something wrong, how do I know that that bank in that country is doing the same things and they are doing it right? So if I'm a European bank, if I'm a French bank, let's say, and I see that there's a large amount of money coming from Dubai, of course I'm going to ask questions where the money came from, right? Maybe it was at one point in a sports bag in cash format, or even worse, it's coming from some unknown crypto wallet at one point, right? So the problem is that just because I'm regulated in some way, it doesn't mean that the sender bank is also regulated in that way, which is good enough for me to trust them blindly that, yes, I know bank in whatever land I'd never even heard of. I know that you're going to do a good job on your anti-money laundering and KYC check and filter out all the bad guys. So yeah, just send the money for me and I accept it blindly. No, of course you're not going to do that, right? You can lose your license. You can have the penalty. So what do? You check and you check and you check and you check. And when you know that there are some areas in the world which are operating on a looser or even just different set of rules and KYC checks, you might not want to trust them in a way that, okay, well, I don't really trust you that you are doing a good job, dear bank overseas. Don't forget that when we are talking about taxation, there is a big chunk of this tax and regulatory arbitrage, meaning that I'm setting up a company in Dubai and I'm only paying 9% instead of going to Spain and pay 45%, right? Because the banks are appointed to filter out all these illegal activities, including tax avoidance, the bank's responsibility to make sure that, hey, you're living in Spain, you're breathing the Spanish air, you're walking on the Spanish floors, you're eating the Spanish tapas. Why are you not actually paying the 45% Spanish taxes? What is wrong with you? So the banks have to make sure that you are doing the right thing, because if they don't, they lose their license, right? So they have to make sure that you are not doing any kind of tax arbitrage, you're not creative way out yourself out of the system, right? And when it comes to cash or crypto, which is very, very present here in this area in the world, unfortunately, you can't really check the source of funds. You can't really see that how was it regulated. You know, crypto is great because anyone can send money to anywhere. Yeah, it's good, but it's bad at the same time. So the problem is that the bank is putting the clients according to the risk profile. The high risk client is whoever is broke, right? Is not going to pay my fees, who is a bit untrustworthy, who is coming from places that I can't really check what was the activity before, for example, startups, or coming from areas when the regulator is not that strict, right? But I still need to see how can I generate profit, because if all the banks are just dealing with the bakeries and with the low risk client, there's no money in it, right? Because you're competing with hundreds and thousands of financial institutions. So you need to understand that you've got a low risk profile in your portfolio, all of those supermarkets and good companies and good clients. But high risk means that higher profit. So in that case, you can go a little bit higher risk just to actually generate that profit for your shareholders, what you need to do as a private company. So you need to think about that if you're going to, not just Dubai, not just to this area, to anywhere in the world, and you try to do business abroad, you need to see that that's one thing what your tax advisor is going to tell you, but it's a whole different thing. Can you actually execute that? Can you actually get a bank or a payment provider who is willing to work with you? And the other problem, as we said at the beginning, who to ask. You go to your accountants, they are not trained on that. If you are going to your lawyer, they are not trained on that. So who are you going to when your accounts are frozen? Who are you going to when the bank doesn't open an account for you? There is no education in the market currently for payments and banking knowledge. And this is a huge problem. Now, high risk, what does it mean for high risk? Yes, maybe you are coming from a high risk country, right? Your country or your activities or your tax is prone to tax evasion, offshore companies, or your area is prone to looser regulation. For example, financial services in St. Vincent when there is no license for that, right? So what does it mean? Yes, I'm high risk. But if I'm opening an account with a bank or a financial institution and they are willing to work with me, that means that they are working with other ones like me as well, right? And it doesn't mean that I'm making something wrong. But if anyone else in the pool of that financial institution is doing something wrong, and the money gets frozen, and they get an audit, and the financial institution is going through under different audits and shut the account, no money in or out, it's my money in it. So it doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. But just because you're high risk means higher risk for everyone, right? So I am high risk. That means that all of those financial institutions and banks are willing to work with me are going to be high risk as well. So if I'm setting up a company in an area which is more likely to do tax avoidance or the wrong thing, then all of those banks who are taking those companies are also pose a significant amount of risk to my operation. And it also means it's higher fees. Because I'm higher risk, so that means that it has to worth for the financial institution. So many cases, just because you spare some money on taxes, it doesn't mean that you're not spending double or triple on your banking fees. You're not spending double or triple or tenfold on all of those lost funds or frozen funds when the bank is giving you a headache and you can't move money internationally. Because at one point the bank tells you that, oh, so sorry, something happened. Unfortunately, we lost our SWIFT rail. You can't pay your providers. Sorry, it's a week. How much money are you going to lose on the deal just because the bank closed your account, just because you're working with a higher risk of a bank? So you got less favorable terms and conditions, you've got higher fees, you've got basically limited access to financial products, right? Because you can only work with e-money institutions or payment institutions who don't give you credit, for example, right? So yes, at one point you might spare some money on taxes, good for you, but what is the risk and what is the extra cost that you are taking in return to enjoy lower taxes, to take your business offshore? And that's what I mentioned about the pooled funds. When you have a bank or a financial institution and they are working with high risk clients and they are doing something that any other client in the pool is doing something wrong, it might affect your funds as well if they get delayed, frozen, or lost. So very important. What I'm advocating for is it's no longer I've got an idea, I set up a company, I get the funds, I create a minimum viable product, and then I find a bank or a payment provider who is willing to work with me. No, 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 no. You need to see that who is the bank or payment provider who is willing to work with you, under what kind of circumstances, what are your limitations and capabilities to be able to move the funds left, right, and pay your suppliers, pay your salaries, or collect money from your clients. And once you know 100% that you are able to move money in a way that you want, on a fee that you want, on terms and conditions that you need, that's when you start talking to your lawyers and start to incorporate a company. And that's when you need to start thinking about taxes, not the other way around. Because I have seen so many cases. There's a good startup meeting some investor in a beach bar who says that, yes, I'm going to fund you in cash, take it. Of course, you're a startup, hungry for funding, accepting the cash, and then start to promise everything to your team that we're going to be rich guys, I'm going to pay you in crypto, I'm going to pay you in cash, until they actually open a bank account. Maybe even the bank account works for 1 or 2 weeks, but then they shut you down. And that's when the problems start, that you are launching, the clients are there to pay you money and you're unable to accept it because you don't have a bank account, because you don't have a payment provider. And this is the biggest problem, not your taxes. Now, when you have international group of companies, it is especially important that you have someone on your team who understands payments and banking. And no, that's not your accountant or tax advisor, who understands how banks think and how money moves internationally. Because if you've got a company in Singapore, you've got a company in Dubai, you've got a company in France, and you've got a company in the States, how are you going to send money between the companies, right? What bank is charging you what? Who is doing the currency exchange? How the money is coming from one company to another one? What are the bank's risk appetite for different kind of countries who are sending or receiving funds? This is your problem more than your taxation. And you need to have a holistic approach, because banking and payments is usually handled by finance, and that's the problem. Because banking and payments affects your customer experience, how the customer is seeing what's on the checkout page, right? I had a client who was dealing with beautiful, sustainable, green, natural face creams and everything. The website has a beautiful look and a beautiful feel. But they made an agreement with a payment provider who was like this brutal purple checkout page. They lost 40% of their clients because they thought that it's all a scam. As soon as the client goes on the checkout page and clicks, and it does not it doesn't reflect the overall feel and customer experience, what they experienced on the website, customers leave. And you can have the best marketing, and you could spend a lot of money on the deals, and you can have the best sales team. If the checkout page is not reflecting the customer experience the customer had, you can lose them like that. It affects data security, how your payment and banking is handled, and how your customer data is handled. It affects even GDPR, right, when you're dealing with the European clients. It affects your compliance. So your legal team needs to be, in a way, involved when you're agreeing with a new payment or banking provider, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. It affects data and integration and technology. How are you integrating that bank? I had a client who was having a new payment provider, and they were cheap and everything was good. Yeah, but it took 6 months until the team teams developed the relevant API so they could actually include them in their CRM system. And until then, what happened? 20 people were just manually reconciling data on a daily basis, right? So payments and banking today affect every part of your organization. It affects basically the whole value chain. But still, it's handled by finance, who are not trained on that, who won't be able to tell you what is the benefit or what is the downfall of the new fintech innovation, how does it affect us if we integrate crypto in the mix, what is the risk that you are taking with different decisions around your money. So it's very, very important that you have a full holistic approach. And you have to have a plan, a banking and payment plan, which you monitor and revise at least, obviously depends how big is your organization, but at least once every 3 months, because new things are coming up. Your business is changing, your volume is changing, you are going to new jurisdictions, but the payment providers are changing. They have new financial products and services. They have new fees. They have new terms and conditions. You can actually go back and renegotiate your terms, saying that, hey, I'm your client for 2 years. Why am I paying the fees that we agreed 2 years ago? Now you know me. Now you trust me. Drop your fees, otherwise I'm taking my business elsewhere. So many companies don't take advantage of this and paying fees that they shouldn't, take risks that actually they shouldn't. And very important, you need to educate your teams. And I know that there is not that much of a payment and banking education out there. Obviously, that's why we started the Soltesz Institute. But you need to make sure that your team understands what are the capabilities, what are the limitations when it comes to payments and banking. So you need to excel your payments and banking knowledge, and that's what we do with the Institute. We have courses, workshops, webinars to give you a clear understanding of the banking and the payment world. We have practical cases because I'm working as a payment and banking consultant for 7 years now. We've got a lot of real-life examples so we can learn from others' mistakes. And we also the only ones who are giving EU certificates on payment and banking knowledge and education. And of course, we have a community membership as well where you can discuss everything. So think, plan, strategize ahead. And if anyone has any questions,